we are talking about the Lake Berryessa Glory Hole and record snow. I know, just get your laughs out right now. I'm ABC 10 Chief Meteorologist Monica Woods. Right here in California, we have multiple ways of getting rid of some of the excess water. One of the ways is through something called the Glory Hole. This is over towards Lake Berryessa, in between roughly Sacramento and the Bay Area. We'll talk about that in just a moment and some of the changes that we've been seeing. First, let's talk about some of the record-setting snowfall and some rainfall that we've been dealing with throughout the Central Valley. Now, some snow showers still possible into our Thursday forecast. The rain, for all intents and purposes, is pretty much done from this particular cold spring storm heading into our Thursday and finally getting rid of some of that Sierra snow there into our Thursday evening, Friday. Our rainfall over the past month or so, sometimes we call this here in Northern California Miracle March. That's only when we need the rain and snow. We didn't necessarily need all of it, but we certainly got our fair share, with yesterday actually being one of the wettest days that we saw over the month, with our total to date just for this month just shy of 5 inches of rain. That's going to put us almost 3 inches ahead of normal. And for downtown Sacramento in particular, you can see how it's closing in on one of the wettest years in the past several here. Not quite the 2016-2017 level where we had almost 34 inches of rain, but we're now closing in on that 2018-2019 year, and more still falling. And we've got more rain actually in the forecast. It's just at this point in the year, we usually start to see that rain start to taper off. Downtown Sacramento also hitting a benchmark today as well. Total rainfall at 25.65 inches now is more than the past 2 years combined. We were coming into this year deep into drought throughout the entire state, and particularly hard hit was the northwest corner of California and really all of Northern California, where some of our biggest reservoirs are. So these numbers are certainly sitting well with us right now. On the flip side, unfortunately, we're dealing with the flooding, but at least we're starting to recover from several years of drought. And those numbers are true pretty much throughout the entire state, where most of us are still well above average. The only outlier there, again, Palm Springs, just roughly about 1/10 of an inch behind where they normally are at this point in the season. They usually don't see a whole lot, so those numbers tend to fluctuate a little bit easier than, say, extreme Northern California. All right, let's get to Lake Berryessa. Now, this is what it looked like at the beginning of the water year. It's always a fun spot to kind of see the changes because it's so visual. You can see, here's the Glory Hole right here. Basically, what happens is the upstream dam lets out water, and so this just allows for that easy overflow. It's very naturally occurring, and so it allows that water to recede without additional flooding risk happening. Now let's fast forward to just about the past couple of days, and you can see the water line coming up here. Nowhere near overflow. We saw that, several years ago where the water was actually flowing over. So the water levels are doing okay here in Northern California, but as we'll start to see, that's not necessarily going to be the case through Central and Southern California. Snowfall totals just from this weather system alone came in at about 15 to 20 inches of snow. When we look at the entire year, though, Carson passed over 800 inches of snow. Sugar Bowl, over 750 inches of snow. Palisades, Tahoe, Kirkwood, Sierra, Tahoe, all over 650, almost 700 inches of snow. So many of our ski resorts are going to stay open deeper into the season, and some even saying, we'll go to July 4th. Why not, right? Well, record snowfall happening today at Mammoth. You can see some of the ski lifts there trying to struggle to even make it up the hill, and that's because they're having to dig out to even access some of those ski lifts moving up the hill. Now it's 695 inches of snow. That supersedes anything that we've seen in years past here. 668.5 inches of snow back in that epic year of 2010, 2011. This year, we topped it. The other place that we've been watching as well is the Central Sierra Snow Lab. That's associated with UC Berkeley. They're up there by Soda Springs, and you can see what's happening here. Back in 1952, we had 67.65 feet of snow. This year, we're at about 59.5 inches of snow, and again, and counting. It doesn't look likely that we'll see that 0.65 feet of snow like we did in 1952, but we're now at the second snowiest on record there at the Central Sierra Snow Lab. Now, when we take a look at that snow, the reason why I point that out is it's very critical at this point in the season. We're now roughly at the point where we start to see the peak snow melt. No longer will we be accumulating so much snow. Instead, we're going to be monitoring how much water comes out of that snow. So the snow water equivalent becomes very important. How much water, if we were to melt down that snow, would we get out of that snowpack? And it always is not apples to apples here. Sometimes the snow is very fluffy and icy, and we don't get a whole lot of water content from it. But sometimes, we like to call it Sierra cement, has a lot of water content in it. So this is what the Sierra Snow Lab is looking like right now. It's almost at the max here, and at times has been above that max snow water equivalent. That's generally in the Tahoe Basin. Okay, now places that are at a little bit more risk of the flooding, especially for the spring flooding, is going to be in the central and southern Sierra. And the reason being is our snow water equivalent is really, really high right now. In fact, in some places, record high snow water equivalent. This is at Virginia Lakes. It's just north of Mono Lake. So it's more so in the central Sierra. And you can see this line right here in the black. That represents where we are right now, as opposed to some of the more historic snowfall and snow water equivalents that we've seen in years past. You can see with our percentages too. Right now, we're going to kind of close the gap on the April 1st average and the average to date. The northern, central, and southern Sierra all well above average, anywhere from almost 200 to almost 300% of average. The southern Sierra is one to watch because the channels that are downstream from that snowpack are not particularly large, and it's going to take a lot to deal with that amount of snow melting down the hill. Statewide, things are looking great. On the positive side of things, we have water to take us through the dry season. The Central Valley Project just announcing that they're going to increase their allocations heading into the rest of the year. And that's because we just have so much snow at this point. As far as where we are in reference to some of our peak snowpacks that we've seen in the past, we talked about the 2016, 2017 year. 2010 was also a big one, 2011. And then also 1982, 83. That's kind of our reference point here as far as historic snowfall and snowpack. And for the central and southern part of the Sierra, that's going to be well above that, especially for the southern Sierra. But the northern Sierra falling a little bit behind that. Some places in the northern Sierra, though, again, as we noted, are still reaching that record high. We have flooding concerns continuing. Now, this has been ongoing for several weeks now. The San Joaquin and the Merced rivers are under a flood warning until further notice. That's because these are downstream from our reservoirs. They're releasing water. It heads down the valley and then kind of spits out in this area. Unfortunately, there's just nowhere for it to go at this point because everything's really at capacity. We're trying to move as much water as we can down south, and some of it is being let out to sea. That is helping to restore some of the salinity in the delta and getting rid of some of the salt water and bringing back some of the fresh water there that ecosystem really thrives on. As far as our water supply, this has been holding pretty steady as well. Water managers have had a very delicate job of keeping enough water in and letting enough water out to prepare for that snow melt, which is going to be happening a little bit more rapidly now, especially as we start to head into a warmer part of the year. It's been cold, and that's kind of some good news right now because it's keeping that snowpack intact. If we were to get a huge heat wave right now, that would spell disaster for us because it would be just too much water coming down the hill. And again, many of these waterways, especially through the central San Joaquin Valley, just don't have a huge channel capacity. So it's going to take a lot to manage that water. We've already seen flooding at Tulare Lake. It's typically a dry lake bed, but in years like this, it comes to life. And unfortunately, it means a lot of flooding. If we were to take a look at both the reservoir storage and the snowpack, so all those numbers that I just showed you right there, well, we're going to be well above average here for all the water stored in the 28 western reservoirs plus the snowpack in the Sierra, but just kind of focusing on the Tulare Basin reservoirs plus snowpack. Again, unfortunately, we're way, way above that line. And the only reason why I say unfortunately is because we're already dealing with flooding. And Tulare Lake in particular, there's nowhere for that water to go. So unless there's big evaporation or pumps to get that water out, it just doesn't have a big outflow port for that water to go. So for the time being, we're just status quo until we start to see some warmer conditions. The spring flood outlook isn't looking terrible, but you'll notice right here through the central and almost into the southern part of the state, we are starting to get into that more moderate range. Everywhere else is in the minor range, but the risk factors really grow here throughout much of the eastern part of the country, in particular right there throughout western Illinois. That's where we're going to see the major flood. So we could see a much higher risk factor here in California. So all this churning, all these weather systems that have been coming in, that have been delivering epic snowpack, rainfall amounts that have been more than the past 2 years combined, and also the flooding issues. What they're also doing, all those storms, they're churning up the ocean. So it's creating this upwelling. So the colder water is coming to the top. And right now, our sea surface temperatures across the West Coast are about 1 to 2 degrees colder than average, whereas almost the entire rest of the globe is seeing warming in the oceans. We are seeing colder than average temperatures, again, because of all of those storms that have been coming through. What's been happening over the past winter is we've got this ridge of high pressure that is basically just south of the Gulf of Alaska. That's bumping up the storm track. It's amplifying it so that then this low just cradles right in through the West Coast. That cold air comes in, and occasionally we'll get the storms coming in, but it also allows access to, as that moisture streams in from the Pacific, these lows are tapping into it, and it just pulls all of this moisture right through California and the Pacific Northwest. But many of them have been hitting California this year. The cold air also keeping us incredibly colder than where we usually are throughout the entire season. From late December, when we started to see the series of more moderate to extreme atmospheric rivers coming through, until just now, temperatures are running on average about 1 to almost 4 degrees below where we normally are. So that's taking into account both the daytime high and the overnight low. So that's true throughout the entire valley. But when we talk about Sierra conditions, we're anywhere from about 4 to 10 degrees colder. Again, the good news on that is it's keeping that snow intact. We do not want that running off very soon. And it will happen because, as you can see, our average highs are trending up. By Easter, it's 70. By Mother's Day, 80. By the time we get to summer, our average high is almost 90 degrees. And again, if you remember, some of the ski resorts are going to be skiing through July 4th. So even when we're seeing temperatures like this, because that that snowpack is so incredibly cold, it's going to take a lot of heat to warm it and melt it as well. We're likely going to be cooler into the middle of April, but on the flip side of that, we're now starting to see a likely drier scenario. And that means a slow metering of that snowpack melting and filling our reservoirs and some of our groundwater restoration as well. Our rainfall typically really flattens out by the time we get into April. So this isn't a huge surprise to see that in the forecast. May can have some wet components to it, but in general, what we start to see is less of these low pressure systems coming through. We got the last of our work week one moving off to the east here. We have a couple of weather systems working into the north, and that is going to give us just a slight chance of some light showers through the weekend forecast and into next week. As far as huge atmospheric rivers, we're not tracking anything significant at this point. There is something brewing out here towards the middle of April, which could potentially hit us for Easter. Right now, we're going to keep it on the dry side, at least into the beginning of the next weekend, but it will be something to watch. And as you can see, our temperatures look like they're finally going to be climbing out of the 50s back into the 60s and almost to near 70 by next weekend.